During the 2004-05 season, the NHL entered a league-wide lockout, and once the league returned to play the following year, the way the game would be played changed in more ways than one. The league would implement a handful of rules that made the game faster, more skilled, yet also more restricted. And perhaps one of the most restrictive rules was created thanks to one player in particular. Most rules are created due to either a freak accident or a terrible officiating mistake, but some rules also get created due to the pure dominance from a certain player. Martin Brodeur was already an all-time great during the time of the 05-06 season. His skill and poise in the crease allowed for massive success, but his play outside of his crease was also just as dominant. Brodeur was often known to leave his net to play the puck, becoming one of the best puck handlers in the entire league. When he eventually hung up the skates, Marty would finish third all-time in assists for goaltenders with 45, and first all-time for goals by a goaltender with not one, but 2. The league knew that Brodeur's puck handling abilities gave New Jersey a major advantage over other teams, and once returning from the lockout, decided to make handling the puck much more difficult for goaltenders. If you've ever wondered why there's a red trapezoid behind the net, this is why. The NHL would create the trapezoid, a small space behind the net where the goaltender could play the puck. However, if they played the puck outside of the trapezoid, they would be assessed with a minor penalty. The official rule states, quote, "A goaltender shall not play the puck outside of the designated area behind the net. Should the goaltender play the puck outside of the area, a minor penalty for delay of game shall be imposed. The minor penalty will not be assessed when a goalkeeper plays the puck while maintaining skate contact within his goal crease." Most fans hated the rule once it was created, and even after the league tried expanding the trapezoid area, many still think it should be completely abolished altogether. An article from Bleacher Report back in 2012 stated that the NHL should remove the trapezoid, amongst other rules they deemed worthy of being mentioned. The other rule that headlined the article is a rule called touch icing. Touch icing was the extremely dangerous way icings used to be called. If the puck was trickling down the ice, both players from both teams would race full speed to the end boards, trying to be the first one to touch the puck. Just by hearing that, most could already imagine what horrors could occur if something goes wrong. And unfortunately, it wasn't until one player went down with an injury that the NHL decided to do something about it. Hurricanes Joni Pikkinen and a Capitals defender raced full speed to try and touch the puck when Pikkinen would fly full speed into the boards. The impact caused him to go down with a brutal heel injury, and the scene that followed saw Pikkinen being stretched off the ice, never to be seen on NHL ice again. This moment ultimately ended Pikkinen's NHL and professional hockey career, as after numerous attempts to return, as well as play again back home in Finland, Pikkinen would be forced to retire for good in 2016 after only playing 3 games with his hometown team. His reasoning for doing so? The lingering injury. What many forget, however, is that Pikkinen wasn't even the first casualty of the touch icing rule, as sadly, it would end up taking the life of another player. In 1990, Czech player Ludek Kajka would suffer severe spinal injuries after colliding along the boards in an icing situation. He would end up becoming paralyzed due to the collision, and a month later, he would sadly pass away due to the injury. His loss and Pikkinen's injury allowed touch icings to eventually become banished all throughout professional hockey, as after the 2013-14 season, the NHL would switch to hybrid icing permanently, which allowed for an icing to be called without making a player have to race down and touch the puck, a much safer option that shouldn't have taken so long to implement. Another instance of the league having to create a rule due to pure dominance takes us all the way back to the foundational days of the NHL. When looking up the best goals against average in NHL history, one name wipes the floor. That name is George Hainsworth. Hainsworth holds a mind-blowing .92 goals against average, going along with 22 shutouts, which he managed to accomplish during the 1928-29 season, putting him in the #1 spot. Who holds the second best goals against average in league history? Also, George Hainsworth. This time with a 105 goals against average that he accomplished just a year prior. There had to have been a reason as to why Hainsworth was that dominant, and there was. During the 1920s, players weren't allowed to pass the puck forward up the ice, and because of this, it allowed goaltenders like Hainsworth to capitalize heavily. But because of George's success, the league decided to allow forward passes come the 29-30 season, a year after his monumental performance. Hainsworth's numbers are out of this world at first glance, but perhaps the craziest thing about those numbers are his overall records that came with them, as during that dominant .92 season, he still recorded 7 losses and 15 ties, finishing with a record of 22, 7, and 15, which leaves another question. If he managed to lose and tie a total of 32 games and still post a .92 goals against average, then imagine how much better his numbers would have been if he had just won half of those games. If it wasn't already untouchable now, it sure would have been then. All throughout the video, we've talked about individual players forcing the league to make rule changes, but what about an entire team? The San Jose Sharks' 2019 playoff run was filled with several controversial moments that sparked tons of conversations, which became so heavily debated that the NHL would step in and be forced to create rules because of them. 2 major instances occurred throughout the run that forced the league to make rule changes. Perhaps the most infamous moment occurred during the opening round against Vegas. Vegas led the game 3-0 during the time of which this event took place. In a pivotal Game 7 off the face-off, Sharks' Joe Pavelski would get clipped by the stick of Vegas' Cody Eakin, causing him to fall down to the ice. And due to the impact of the hit, Pavelski will be forced to leave the game due to an injury, and the league would make an extremely questionable call, giving Eakin a 5-minute major, allowing San Jose an opportunity to claw back into the game. Well, San Jose was furious. And what happened next is one of the craziest sequences you'll ever see.
Shoots that block, the bank sends it back across the tree. That took 6 seconds, and the Sharks are on the board. Carlson along, Risha, touchdown! And the Sharks are within 1. Swings it back across the tree, shoots, works his way in, the bank walks it in, fires.
San Jose would score 4 in 5, giving them the lead. Vegas would still manage to tie things up, however, but a Barclay Goodrow breakaway would give San Jose the win. A win the NHL admitted they most likely shouldn't have even had. The league would issue an apology to Vegas after the incident, and the league would create Section 20.6 that would state, quote, "The referees are allowed to review major penalties and reduce them to a minor, though they can't rescind the penalty altogether or change a minor to a major." This would become known as the Joe Pavelski rule, and after it was implemented, one of the first times we got to see it play out was when none other than Joe Pavelski would go down yet again, reducing the major to a minor and infuriating the entire Stars bench.
After review, there was no major penalty on the play. The penalties I called were Dallas, number 18, minor penalty for roughing, and a 10-minute misconduct for continuing.
The second incident would occur in the Western Conference Final of that year versus the St. Louis Blues, where Sharks' Timo Meier would assist Erik Karlsson's game winner in a not-so-legal way. The hand pass rule can be defined by Rule 79.1, which states, quote, "A player shall be permitted to stop or bat a puck with his open hand or push it along the ice with his hand unless, in the opinion of the referee, he has directed the puck towards a teammate." In the case of Timo Meier, this was most definitely directed towards Karlsson with the sole intent of getting him the goal. And since it was also in the offensive zone, the play should have been called off immediately. But due to the controversial nature around the pass, the league would change the hand pass rule the following season, allowing for coaches to challenge or question whether or not a pass is in fact a hand pass. Circling back to Timo Meier, during this year's NHL playoffs, perhaps he was better off passing on certain plays, because when he had a golden opportunity to deliver a dagger, he failed in one of the most disappointing ways possible.
Fire all over Pesci, took it away. MacLeod in front, waiting. Great chance. Hughes across. Oh, Meier
Does it get any more wide open than that for Meyer?